Influential Christian Entrepreneur Podcast, where we uncover the inspiring stories and strategies of successful Christian entrepreneurs. In today's episode, we have the pleasure of interviewing Clay Stenson, who is a former pastor and now an innovator in business coaching, specializes in assisting faith-driven construction and trade companies with revenues of anywhere between 5 and 15 million. He aids visionary owners and their teams in realizing their goals, especially when they're feeling overwhelmed and uncertain about the business's independence. While Clean offers both coaching and fractional services, his standout offering is the Unity Rock program. This program empowers visionaries and their seconds in command to harness their differing skills, ensuring their collaboration remains strong and efficient. Through this, he ensures maximum potential from the visionary / second in command relationship. Hey, Clay, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having you too. I was hoping not to blah, blah, blah. I saw that bio up. It's quite interesting. So glad you didn't put anything about EOS because I'm going to ask you about that. I was talking to Corey Swanson the other day and I was like, yeah, he does something with Fractional and he's like EOS. And I'm like, oh yeah, that. I don't know what it is, but that's what it is. It's on his website. So thank you for being here today. I wanted to ask you, Clay, so you work with fractional people who are fractional in any capacity, whether it's marketing, whether it's any type of fractional or specific type of fractionals.
Sorry, actually, I am a fractional. So I work
Oh,
fractionally with companies.
oh,
So
you work fractionally with
yeah,
companies.
I'm a fractional integrator for companies that run on EOS, like you mentioned, which is
And what is EOS?
it's the entrepreneurial operating system. It's a system that was created by Gino Wickman, I think about 20 years ago, and it's just a system for how to run a business. I think typically it's companies 10 to 250 employees. It's just really a system, kind of like your computer would have an operating system. The
Right.
business needs an operating system.
Okay, so then you have the visionary who's usually the founder. Okay, he's got a second in command who's this person that he brings in to hold on to the reins because the visionaries usually just like have a 30,000 foot view and they're way up there in the stratosphere and they need somebody to keep hold of those reins so they don't just fly off, right? And so you have those two people, which I assume have very different skills and possibly personalities, but they
Yeah,
complement each other.
yeah,
Okay. And so then you come in though, but even though they complement each other, I'm assuming that many times it's not always easy. Um, and so then you come in with this system to make everything work much better. Correct?
yeah. So yeah, typically, so one analogy that I use to describe a visionary is that they're the spark plug for the organization. But if
Mm-hmm.
they don't have an integrator or second in command, they tend to be more like sparks flying everywhere, right? Like there's no focus, right? It's not dialed
Yeah.
in. It's not there's not a good direction for it sometimes. So they need a second in command or integrator, like the EOS system talks about, and that person, yeah, like you said, is complementary skill set, right? They're logical, process oriented, usually really good at managing people and holding people accountable, which the visionary is typically not great at. So the two of them
Mm-hmm.
work really well together. So sometimes I am the second in command fractionally for a company if they don't have somebody,
Mm-hmm.
but other times I'm a coach where I'll support
Mm-hmm.
them in their journey, either coaching the visionary. The challenge for
Mm-hmm.
visionaries, quite often, especially if they're founders, is that they're used to doing things their own way because at the start they had to do it and there was no one
Yeah.
else, right, to lead the company. So they're just used to doing their own thing and running their own thing. And then eventually, though, it gets too big and they can't do it on their own anymore. And they need a leadership team or a second in command. And it can be hard at first to learn how to let go, right, and trust someone else
Mm-hmm.
to do things. So sometimes they need coaching on that
Yeah.
side. And then, as you alluded to, the second in command usually needs coaching on how to relate to the visionary because their brain just works very differently than a logical
Yeah.
process oriented person.
Yeah. I think I probably fall in the visionary bucket more than likely because I'm just not that logical person that is just I'm the one who's like, oh, I want to do everything,
Yeah.
you
Yeah, and
know?
that's a common issue with
Um,
the visionary. They have 100 ideas all the time, and the integrator, second in command, comes in and kind of helps them. What I recommend is into three buckets, right? It's yes, we should do this. No, we shouldn't do this, or not now, right? You just
right.
park that one. Yeah, it might be a good idea, but now it's not the timing, so we'll park that. We'll discuss it next quarter, kind of thing.
Yes. Yes. Or else we're chasing around. I mean,
Yeah.
it's incredible how visionaries get things to go in the first place. I'm assuming, like if you're a visionary like me, like, oh my gosh, because I'm thinking that most visionaries probably have a lot of stuff going in their head simultaneously,
Mhm.
like chaos up in the brain. And so I think that's what makes things a little bit difficult from the
Yeah,
implementation standpoint many times.
yeah, it definitely can, for sure.
And so what made you want to work with people I'm curious, in the construct. So you're like me, you're pretty niche down, like,
Yeah,
okay, Christian business in construction.
yeah.
And so what brought you there?
Yeah, well, my first experience as a second in command was in construction. And
Okay.
prior to that, like when I was very young, like early 20s, I was a apprentice carpenter for a while. So I helped, I
Mm,
did house building, residential. So and then I grew up on a farm and, we did renovations and stuff too, on our farm. So I grew up, doing construction and trades and stuff like that.
right.
So yeah, it's just I don't know. It's just it isn't necessary that the companies
Mm,
that I have experience in the field of the companies that I work with, because by and large, what I do is it's all about people and systems, right? So it's very transferable. For example, I was a pastor for 7 years, and then I went into construction, and I thought, how is this going to be transferable? But it was extremely transferable. Um, but yeah, so it seems like a lot of people are drawn to me because of my construction background. So that's
uh-huh.
why I decided to niche into that.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Now, tell me a little bit more about you and your Christian background. Have you always been a Christian? I know you just said you were a pastor. I thought you were a carpenter first and then became a pastor, but sounds like it was the other way around. Were you always a Christian, or did you become a Christian later on in life?
No, no, I was growing up. I was not a Christian. I was not in a Christian family. My
Mm,
parents went to church growing up, but for whatever reason, we they didn't take us to church. So the first time I went to church, I was 18, and
mm.
it was really boring. I was not interested at all, to be honest.
Yeah.
And then later, I ended up going to a different kind of church in Australia a couple of times. So up until I was 22, I only went to church 3 times my whole life. Um, and then I went through a very tough season where I was depressed and had anxiety issues. And I went to a conference, and one of the speakers said that you become the average of the five people you hang around with most, so choose wisely. And I was like, okay, I was fairly self-aware. I was like, okay, well, who do I want to be like? And I actually got a pen out and a piece of paper and I made a list of who I would like to be like. And the first person at the top of the list was someone that I met in Australia, and they had an incredible impact on my life. And then I filled out the list, and at the end, I had about 10 people on there. And I looked at the list and I said, okay, what do these people have in common? And I realized really quickly they were all Christians. And so I decided I should go to church. But I'd never been to church in the city that I lived in. So I asked one of them. None of them lived in my city either. But I reached out to one of them and asked if they knew somebody that went to church in my city, and she introduced me to somebody, and then I went to church, and kind of a crazy story. And basically, I was in what I call hermit mode during that time. Like I was just shutting off the world. I had a job. I'd do my job. I'd play video games, and I would sleep, and then I just repeat every day. And when I went to the church the first time, the message was called "Giving the Gift That Is You," and he said that if that God created you with a purpose, He put gifts and abilities inside of you, and if you're not using those gifts and abilities to impact the world and to bring Him glory, you're missing out on the reason you were born, and you'll never really fully be fulfilled. And I sat there looking at him like, how does this guy know like he's reading my mail. Like how did he know that I was in that, felt like I was the only person in the room. And then about 3 months later, I took the Alpha course at that church, and then I got saved through that. And yeah, that was almost 16 years ago that I first went to church.
Wow. Was that in Australia or here?
That was in Canada. Yeah, when I was back home.
Oh, so are you American?
No, I'm in Canada.
No, I mean, okay, you're Canadian. Oh, I
Yeah,
got you all
yeah.
mixed up.
That's
Okay,
okay.
so
No,
you're
I'm
Canadian.
I'm in Calgary. Yeah, Alberta.
Okay, and so you're in Canada. For some reason, I thought you were here in the US,
No,
and
that's okay.
then you lived in Australia for some time.
Yeah, 6 months. Yeah,
Okay, and
yeah,
so you were a pastor in Canada for 7 years.
7 years. Yeah, yeah.
Wow. And then what made you make the transition from pastor to the business world?
Yeah, well, that's not a fun story, but it's a pretty central part of my life. So I got married in 2010, and um, we got pregnant for the first time in 2014. Well, the end of 2013, after 2 years of trying, and then so it was October 2014. Our son was born, but he was born and he wasn't breathing, and it took 17 minutes to resuscitate him, and unfortunately he lived for 35 hours and then he died. So I took 10 weeks off. My wife and I both took 10 weeks off, tried to process it. Then I went back to work. I thought I was okay, but really I was just hiding from the grief with busyness. And then it came up, like it came back up. And so then I took another 10 weeks off, and then basically just decided that I needed some time to process this. So I took a sabbatical for a year, and then I got a job at a construction company, and I loved it, and so I never went back. So it wasn't really an intentional thing on the short term, but then that role grew, and I loved what I was doing. I discovered EOS, and I never went back to ministry. Although I still feel like I do a ton of ministry. It's just in a different
You
context.
do
Yeah,
in a different way. Yeah, of
yeah,
course, ministry in the marketplace, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
So, they always say that the premise behind this podcast is um should be we've always been told to never mix business and faith because faith, and people say religion, but faith, it should not be mixed because faith is something personal, and we shouldn't bring it to the workplace because in the workplace or marketplace, we are out there with people who may not share the same faith as we do, and sharing this stuff outside of the context of our personal life, it could be offensive to others, or it could really turn off people, which could make you lose business, make you lose credibility as well. And so my question to you is, what do you think about that? Do you think it is okay to mix your faith in your business? Is it okay to publicly profess your faith in the marketplace in a business environment?
Hope so, because I do it a lot. Just kidding. No, I think one of the problems we have in our society today is that for generations, potentially, we've been telling people not to talk about politics and religion. Uh,
Hmm.
and now we don't know how to talk about politics and religion in a healthy way. Right. So for me, my belief is that my faith is central to who I am. So I cannot not talk about it. I'm very upfront that I was a pastor. I'm very upfront about my faith, but I do it in a reasonable way. Someone asked me this question last week. I was on another podcast, and she said, like, how do you share your faith with your clients' employees, right? And I said, well, I always ask permission, right? If I'm in a coaching call with somebody, and I feel like a story from my past that includes my faith or a Bible story or something will help, will impact them, I'll say, hey, you know what, I have a story that I want to tell you, and it includes my faith, and I don't know where you're at with your faith and with your spirituality, but is it okay with you if I share, a story from my own. And I've done that a lot, and I've never had anyone say no. And if they did
Because you're
it,
speaking from a first person,
yeah, it's just my
right? You're speaking
story.
about yourself, a story, right?
Yeah, and it's testimonial, and you can believe whatever you want, and so can I. And if I think something from my own faith walk is going to help you, I want to share it because I
Mm-hmm.
want to help you. But you also have to build relationships, right, to be able to go there, right? But I go there
Right.
all the time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Now, I haven't always worked with Christian business owners, and sometimes I'm working with non-Christian business owners, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
upfront about it right from day one. It's like, this is who I am. And, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and I think if that isn't okay with you, then,
Mm-hmm.
other people I can
Right.
introduce to, right?
If they're not okay with it. Right.
Yeah.
Right. But do you is it explicit? Like when somebody sees Clay Stenson online, your brand, will they know that you're Christian from looking at your stuff? And
Oh,
has that any, as far as you know, has it ever stopped anybody from approaching you, somebody who's not a Christian?
I don't know if it's ever stopped somebody. Probably it has, but from a business perspective, I think that's probably a good thing. It
Mm,
filters out people that are the wrong fit anyway. And I wouldn't, if
mm,
they're offended or don't want to work with me, then that's probably a good thing that they know that up front. But yes, if you look at my LinkedIn, right at the top, it says Christ-centered second in command network founder.
ah, yeah.
That's in my headline. And then if you read my about section, it says right in there, I love God and I want to serve him in
Uh,
great glory. So unless you don't read it, I think you'd have a hard time.
Yeah, for sure. So it is explicit. And I find that everybody has a different approach. In our case, because my ideal clients are Christian men, and you work mostly with Christians, it would make no sense not to make it public, right?
No.
Um, and I think people who may work with people who are not, because not every we don't, of course we don't all need to be working with Christians. That's not the point. We need to be out there touching other lives. That's the whole point. And so people who don't work with Christians may sometimes choose a different approach, which is more, instead of explicit up front, more like you do it in the back after you've established a rapport. That's another way people do it as
Yeah.
well. I always find that your approach is great, because regardless of whether you work with Christians or not, if you write a personal story about your personal testimony or how God has worked in your life, and you post it on social media, let's just say, nobody's going to see it as you being judgmental towards them or telling them what to do. They're just going to see it for what it is. It's your story, it's your life experience. And usually, I think 99% of people are okay with that. Although, and I feel that that is the way for many of us Christians to go, because I don't know if I told you, I've only been a Christian since 2020. And that is exactly how I came to Christ, by seeing people who I cannot remember who they are, don't know who they are, don't remember, but by them posting about their personal stories and their personal testimony, started to make me think. And
Mhm.
that seed was planted, which eventually grew, and they may never know that they had
Yeah.
an impact at all.
Yeah.
I can't even remember who they are. But I think that as Christians, whether we work with Christians or not, that is a very good idea, to use our life point as a
Yeah.
way to bring people to
Yeah.
God.
My first fractional client wasn't a Christian. And the company was a quite quite a challenge and quite a mess. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
one point he said to me, Clayton, how are you so calm? Right? Like, how do you have so much peace? And I said, it's my faith, right? Like, I know that God is guiding me, and I know that He uses all things together for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. So it doesn't really, matter what we're going through. God's going to use it for good as long as I stay connected with Him and stay focused on His purpose, right? And He's like, I want that, like he said, and we had a couple other people that I'd hired that were Christians, and he said, like, I see it in all three of you, and it's like I I just don't know how you do it, right? Like and so I know it was a witness, right? He never became a Christian. I don't have a crazy story, of his salvation or whatever, but I
So
know
far, he hasn't
the
become a
Bible talks
Christian.
about how sometimes we're the planter of the seed,
Hmm.
sometimes we're the
Uh-huh.
water of the seed, but God
Yeah.
makes it, right?
Yes, the Holy
But I
Spirit
think
makes it
I
happen.
don't know if I was the planter or the water, but definitely I had a role to
Yeah.
play. And I pray that God will make it grow at some point.
Right. And he may be a bamboo plant that stays underground for 5 years and then in the
Maybe.
last 2 or 3 months just grows super fast. You never
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't time those things. So
Mm.
that is excellent because I don't know if you know this, but so many people have come onto the online. Most people think of the marketplace as, I think, as kind of like the office, but as you know, so many people have come on the online space to be entrepreneurs in the past few years. And so it's not just the marketplace and the office in the building. The marketplace is like online a lot now. And so how are we as Christians reaching out to the virtual marketplace, and doing what we're supposed to be doing? And so I think that what you're doing is definitely something that people can be inspired. And check out his LinkedIn profile. It is Clay Stenson. For my listeners, Clay Stenson, last name Stenson on LinkedIn, Clay, Clay. And you can see what he's talking about, how he puts on his top description on LinkedIn, what he's all about. So get some ideas from there. So Clay, how can people find you? Where is the best place to get a hold of you? Your website, etc.
Yeah, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so that's probably the easiest way. And you already mentioned that, Francine. My website is theunityguide.com. My company's called The Unity Guide.
Uh
So
huh.
you can find me there.
Uh huh.
Both places, there's a way to book a call with me. I'm happy, to meet with anybody who likes to network and is in the business place and is a Christian, and well, even if they're not, but anybody that's like-minded, I'd love to meet with you and have a chat.
Absolutely. Yes. We are very active on LinkedIn. It's the best place to network, right? For business. I never believed that. I was on Facebook forever and I resisted LinkedIn so much. And now that I'm over there, I'm like,
It's way
why did I
better.
wait so long? Isn't it? I mean,
I
it's
think it's
like,
way better. Yeah.
it is. But when you're on Facebook, it's hard to believe. And then I go back to Facebook now and I'm like, wow, I was missing out on a lot. But also it depends on who you're
Yeah.
working with, because like on Facebook, there were a lot of the people in the esoteric type of woo stuff, witchcraft kind of stuff, which was some of the people that I was working with, and they're all on Facebook. So it just depends
I think the
for sure.
biggest difference for me is just much less polarizing. It's more professional. There's less of the Facebook arguments that happen. You don't see that.
Yeah. Yeah, people like to stir the pot on Facebook. I'm one of them. I stir the pot. I won't stir the pot on LinkedIn, but on Facebook, boy, will I stir the pot. Not on politics, but I learned not to do that back in 2020. Oh my gosh! But I'll try to ruffle some feathers, but I'm trying to be more like Christ now.
Yeah.
So I'm taking a different approach. But I still want to ruffle some feathers, but I want to be nicer about it.
Yeah. Well, Jesus ruffled a lot of feathers too.
Oh, like Christ wouldn't do that. Let's not be. So it's a hard thing, but I'm learning.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you, Clay, for being here today.
No problem.
Wow, this was a record. It was so packed with good information. It was such a good interview, and yet we achieved it in a record 25 minutes. I want to thank you for being here today. To all my listeners, thank you for listening. If you are a Christian CEO or executive seeking to authentically integrate your faith and professional brand on LinkedIn to inspire others, further God's kingdom, and leave a legacy, let's connect. My email is hello@francineSinclair.com, or you can find me at francine.sinclair.com as well. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Clay. We'll be back next Tuesday with another amazing guest here on The Influential Christian Entrepreneur. Take care. Bye.